Admit it, we all heard of the rumor that we only use about 10% of our brains, and we believed that for a long time. However, what if I told you that there was just a little bit of merit to that claim? Sure, we use a majority of our brain's resources, maybe just not perpetually, but what if we could take 100% of our focus and brain power and put that into one given task? What if we could lose ourselves in the moment and dedicate ourselves solely to our craft? We could probably reach levels of potential that we could never even fathom, perhaps even become the best at the world, and use that to shoot at people better in an 11-year-old video game. Flow state is a concept developed by Hungarian-American psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, who describes flow as the state in which people are so involved in an activity that nothing else seems to matter. The experience itself is so enjoyable that people will do it even at great cost, for the sheer sake of doing it. Athletes, musicians, and everyday people from all over the world have reported this feeling of being in the moment, where it seems as though everything else doesn't matter, thus increasing their performance in a given task. There is tons of research poured into flow in sports and performance psychology, but in terms of direct research into esports, the data is scarce. However, we can adapt some of the concepts seen in research to our game. But first, we need to define what flow is in essence. Flow is an extreme state of focus that can be seen as fully utilizing all of your brain's resources into one given task. Two of the neurosystems in our brain, the Central Executive Network or CEN, and the Default Mode Network or DMN, showcase heightened activation during external cognitive processing and self-reflection or memory consolidation respectively. In other words, when we are performing a task that requires a lot of cognitively and emotionally challenging activities, our CEN shows higher levels of usage, while autobiographical memory recollection and mind wandering are attributed to DMN usage. The research on the neurological processes involved during flow are relatively sparse. However, there are several theories that try to describe the relationship between the CEN and the DMN during flow. Both neurological processes are important to flow. It's easy to see why CEN usage would help with our ability to play Counter-Strike, as this higher usage means that we could problem solve much more effectively and help enhance our focus. But DMN usage in relation to esports is complicated. Part of the reason why the flow state is so effective for traditional athletes is that exercise naturally downregulates usage of the DMN, so when they enter flow, it's as if they unlock usage of a whole system in their brain. For gamers, it's not quite as potent. According to a study done in South Korea, high-ranked League of Legends players demonstrated higher local function connectivity density in their DMN than those of low-ranked players. To translate that into English, there are more connections within the DMN in high-ranked players through neuroplasticity, the ability of the nervous system to optimize its structure and function in response to usage. Additionally, high-ranked esports players showcase higher usage of their DMN than those of traditional athletes. This is both a good and bad thing, as it means to bridge the gap between maximum utilization of the DMN is much easier for esports players, but it also means that it's not as effective as it would be in traditional athletes. But that does not mean you should not exercise. Although exercise downregulates the default mode network, it also strengthens it. In addition, exercise also naturally increases norepinephrine and serotonin levels, which helps with entering the zone. Other healthy habits such as getting more sleep and practicing meditation are also great ways to strengthen the DMN. Despite this, since we do not control how much our CEN or DMN is engaged, we cannot always guarantee that we can enter the zone. But we can at least try to take the steps to be more engaged and focused in our disciplines. Essentially, our goal is to prime ourselves to enter the zone by facilitating our brain's neurological processes so that we can release the necessary neurochemicals. Speaking of which, during flow, there are a variety of different neurochemicals released, ranging from endorphins, serotonin, and anandamide, but I want to focus on dopamine and norepinephrine. Norepinephrine is released by the locus coeruleus norepinephrine system, where its main job is to stimulate alertness and vigilance. Think of norepinephrine as the regulatory chemical signal for the risk versus reward system in our bodies. If you've learned about flow before, you may have seen charts like these, describing the basic relationship between a player's capabilities versus task difficulty and how that explains flow. To activate flow, a task needs to be difficult enough where you can barely conquer it, or else it will induce anxiety, and the task needs to be stimulating enough to keep your attention. To better demonstrate the effects of norepinephrine on player attention, here's a graph from a mini research paper in the Frontiers Journal of Psychology. If we lack norepinephrine because a task is not engaging or rewarding enough, we will feel bored and will try to find another task worthy of our effort. If there is too much norepinephrine, we lose focus and our brains try to find other tasks that will be much more feasible for us. For our brains to be fully engaged in a given task, there must be a balance between task difficulty and our ability to do that given task. Thus, regulating challenge levels, and by proxy our norepinephrine levels, is important to achieving and maintaining flow state. For example, if you're struggling to aim in a game of CSGO, it might be more productive to focus on your movement and counter-strafing, thus giving your brain a different task to exert effort on. If you're playing really well or facing weak opponents, you could try challenging yourself by placing restrictions, such as only trying to one-tap the enemy or choosing different entry pathing or lurk spots to develop your game. The second important neurochemical to activate flow is dopamine, the neurochemical most associated with happiness and reward. Dopamine helps not only provide the justifiable reward for the amount of focus our brains dedicate to flow state, but also increases alertness and our brain's ability to process information. Most of us understand the basics of naturally increasing dopamine, such as exercising, getting more sunlight, or meditation. But it's also important to note that being in the flow state intrinsically boosts dopamine because, hey, who doesn't like performing at a level that is leagues above your average? But the reason that I bring up dopamine is because there is a certain amount of dopamine needed to enter the zone. This could be achieved in a few ways. Firstly, if you're having a really good game where everything goes right, or you're just having a really good time with friends, the dopamine levels gained from that experience can reach the threshold needed to enter the flow state. However, we all know that getting a good game is rare, so if you want to enter flow state consistently, you'll need a much more reliable source of dopamine. You'll often hear that part of what separates us from the pros is confidence, which is absolutely true. The reason why pros can zone in so much more easily than the rest of us is because they have the foundational confidence, and therefore dopamine, to enter the zone and reach those supreme levels of focus. If you don't have confidence in your Counter-Strike skills, the best way to gain some without faking it is to warm up, but warm up properly. Too many times, people use warm-up as pseudo-practice, trying to improve at the game before they actually play it. But this sometimes causes people to psych themselves out over not being as good as they want to be, but you shouldn't beat yourself up over warm-up. This is what retired CS pros nothing says about warm-up.
To me, warming up is different than practicing, right? A lot of you guys might have a practice or training routine. Now, guys, I haven't done a training routine in quite a few years. Like when I was playing or competing, my training more consists of consistent team practice, deathmatch, and then like if I'm ever feeling off with a weapon, I'll go just sit there and deathmatch and try to hit certain types of shots or something and just feel, why does that feel more difficult? Or why does this thing feel easier now that I used to not do? Or why am I favoring that thing? That's kind of reflecting and reviewing, which I talk about in my csgo course as well, and that kind of approach to practice. But anyways, when I'm just warming up like this, I just want to get my hands warm and my dexterity going, so that's a little different than training.
In addition to getting warm, you should also be positively affirming yourself to set yourself up for success. Building that early confidence before the game will not only help your mind for those unfortunate games, but it will help you enter the flow state in the game with the additional dopamine. But some people almost fear this confidence, as you will find comments under most flow state videos saying something along the lines that they are taken out of the zone every time that they start to do well. However, I personally think that the real issue is that whenever this happens, we fear losing the zone, causing us to lose focus. It's okay to feel hyped after massive plays because, after all, the brain releases a ton of dopamine during flow. Sometimes, we have to let go of that fear of losing out on our potential to fully experience it. To start, adapting healthy habits such as exercising regularly and meditating are great first steps, as they will help increase your attention span and focus, allowing you to enter the zone much more easily. Reducing the amount of stress in your life is also not a bad idea, but sometimes that's unavoidable. However, it is incredibly hard to build confidence in-game if you're not confident in real life. If you're struggling with certain aspects of your life, that oftentimes leaches into your game. I'm not going to sit here and pretend to have the answers to your problems, but it's a truth that needs to be stated. As obvious as this sounds, improving all aspects in your life really does pay dividends in your hobbies. This extends to being burnt out. Sometimes you just need a break from the game or change up your map pool to experience a different aspect of the game. Even playing new games can offer a new perspective that will help you break plateaus and skill level that you might experience in Counter-Strike. Back when I had to play Overwatch 2 for my high school esports team, you can laugh if you want, the experience of grinding to masters in 6 months helped me learn how to develop my skills more efficiently, even if Counter-Strike and Overwatch are completely tactically and mechanically different. Understanding how to process a lot of new information and apply it directly to my game made me a much better Counter-Strike IGL and support player. You never know, if you take a break, maybe you'll come back to Counter-Strike a lot stronger than you were before. And that's about as much science that I'm willing to talk about without a degree. I hope that you guys learned something from this video and can apply it to not only your games, but your daily life as well. Having such a potent tool in your own focus is such a useful asset and will propel your craft to the next dimension. Also, please like and subscribe. It really helps a channel as small as mine, and I'll see you guys very soon.